Welcome, Bishop Mdimi. It's very good to have you here in Canada and very good to have you here as part of the International Bishops' Consultation.
Thank you.
I understand you've been part of all three consultations in London, in Dar es Salaam, and now here in Toronto. Why did you agree to be part of this when you were invited?
Well, before that, we used to exchange theological papers with Diocese of Niagara. They used to write theological papers, and my group also, a theological team in my diocese, used to sit down and respond. Mm-hmm. And the way we used to do it is just to see each other in his or her own context. We would read their papers and say, well, yes, that's fine, but this is how also we do our mission here. Mm-hmm. This is how we see the issues we face and how we respond. And it continued for 2 years. And then at Lambeth, we had the mm-hmm. privilege to be together mm-hmm. Yes. And to see what we can do. Mm-hmm. And so I think for us, it was a natural progression to be involved into this dialogue. So when in the first one was called in London, yes, I was there, and then the second one was in my country, and now we are here, yes.
What were your expectations about meeting together when you began?
It was really to try to understand how the church is doing in your own area, what are the issues you're facing, why are you making these decisions, from what context. Mm-hmm. It was trying to understand, to really listen to what you're saying, mm-hmm. Trying to see how you do God's mission in your own context. And for us also, it was a privilege to share God's mission and how it's done in my area. Mm-hmm. So by listening and talking and sharing, it would cross-fertilize ideas. Mm-hmm. We would learn from one another. And because we are used in my country to talk to Muslim groups mm-hmm. and other groups that we don't share actually the faith, but because we lived in the same area, then we have to talk. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a natural way of just to try to understand how the churches are doing and how we can disagree in so many areas, but at the same time agree in many, many more areas, and then how we can move together. So we thought in that context, the Anglicans are not talking to each other. They're just shouting to one another. I think it's better to sit down and just talk, yeah.
What surprised you as you began your conversations?
It wasn't a surprise as much as a confirmation of what I've been reading mm-hmm. Through the internet, through papers about the church in Canada. But the thing which was new is really to come face to face, to see the smiles and the frowns and body language. And we realized that it was more than just exchange of papers, because when you read on paper, you don't see the individuals. And the most surprising thing, yes, but maybe it was surprising or not, but it was really to know that every bishop was serious, every bishop had a sense of calling, and everybody was trying really to be faithful to his calling and mission. That was clear, mm-hmm. No matter what. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't a surprise, but it was a confirmation of each one's calling in its own context. Mm-hmm. And the thing which was new to me, but it came in a more refreshing way, was to understand why you reached these, let's say, decisions on the issues of which are current in the Anglican communion. And we can then say, okay, yeah, I mean, it didn't start in the church, it started in the civil society. So it wasn't really the church pushing for inclusiveness within, but it was the society has changed. In the past, the laws and regulations of Canada was really covering like a big umbrella for the church. And now it's no longer the case. So how are you going to pastor and minister to these people? So it was an issue which, because the Canadian church has, Canadian culture has changed, and the church is trying to live within that context. And so we're able to understand then why is it so important for you to deal with this issue.
Yes.
And so it was refreshing to hear from bishops who actually engaged in those contexts.
Were there any frustrations in the course of your consultations?
Oh yeah. Our aim was to listen. To listen what the other people is saying, not to correct, no, it's just to listen, and also to listen, and on my part also to talk or to share. But we didn't then know at the end how far we have influenced one another, where are we going. It is important to keep on talking, of course, because by keep on talking and listening, you understand one another better and better. But if you have a time limit, maybe, to say that, okay, we can talk to, let's say, 3 or 4 years, and then by the end of the period, you would have maybe reached 1 or 2 stages. But the dialogue is open. It's very open. So in a way, it is frustrating because we don't know how far we are really making things happen or understand one another, and what solutions we have to propose in order to strengthen the Anglican communion. So that maybe is the frustration. But on the other hand, because every consultation has its own theme, like now the theme here is the covenant, which I don't know whether it's alive or dead, I don't know. And then the marks of mission. And then we review for the last 2 consultations and what contribution this would make and what next. But I think we have found it extremely helpful to be talking and listening to one another, as other people don't talk to one another. And this group is really saying to the Anglican communion, it's better to sit down and talk and listen and learn from one another. Yeah.
Are there any other learnings that you've discovered for you or for your diocese or for the Anglican communion?
Well, yeah, oh yes. I mean, I've been involved in Anglican communion for many years. I was part of the design group for 1998. And we thought we were smart. We thought we were smart that we would divert this issue from being discussed at Lambeth. And actually, that's how we planned in Lambeth 1998. We realized that many of the African dioceses hadn't discussed, although it was mentioned and encouraged in Lambeth 1978. But because we don't share the same concern, the same issues, we have our own challenges. So by 1998, the homosexuality issue hasn't been studied by Africans. And so it was really premature to make a resolution But some people in the north wanted it because they thought, well, they've been discussed for, let's say, 20 years or even more. So they wanted to push. And it wasn't time really to give others room to think through so that when we come together, at least everybody had already had the time to reflect. So it was hurriedly passed, and the results are now as we see it. So yeah, I have been involved, and then Lambeth 2008 we followed. So there have been, yes, there have been frustrations, that there have been points of learning on how to handle difficult questions, and the way also the primates meetings just came, assuming that they had the full authority to speak on behalf of the bishops and the provinces, and that again has proved it wasn't the case. So the frustration is that the instruments of unity are not functioning well. They're not there is no cohesiveness within themselves. And yeah, it has been a frustration and a learning, and how AACC also is doing its business. So I think for me, the Anglican structures today don't really serve the intent of the Anglican community to be one. It needs new structures. The structures we have, which came by the way, they weren't planned. I mean, the ACC is very new, and then the primates meeting from 1978. So these structures are very new, and to make a provincial entity as a point of reference, that is the local church. Again, we have gone far, because as Cyprian said, the local church is where the bishop is, there is the local church. It's no longer the case. So now it's where the province is, that there is the local church. And for the Christian faith, that is not right, because the local church is just part of the household of God. It's bigger than that. So to make national entities as the final point of reference for all the rules, I don't agree. I think the mess we are in have come from the structure of the provinces, which again are very new, because before the 70s, there are very, very few provinces.
So one of the learnings has been around our very structures needing, they're having some growing pains, and we're going to have to wrestle with some of the ways in which those are growing and being used.
I think so, yeah.
What are your hopes for this process that we've been engaged in together?
The process has been very helpful, first of all, and I would like it to be replicated within the Anglican communion, or widen the scope. Because by talking and listening to one another, we stay together. And as long as we have got all these problems at the moment, I think having a group like this is very, very helpful, because it continues the dialogue, it continues the talking and learning. So in itself, it brings people together, and I will support it. Whether now we should extend it or encourage other groups to do the same. And I think as long as we haven't come to a consensus on so many of the issues, then this methodology of staying together, I think is it is important. What next? Well, we're going to talk about the marks of mission. And maybe some of the partner dioceses would like to do mission together. So it's just more than talking and listening. So you could do and also you could involve the clergy, you could involve the laity. So if you extend the talking to also include the whole church, I think it would be a good idea. How you do that, I don't know. The idea in the past of companion dioceses is again failed. But it is important to continue to involve as many people as possible. And by talking and sharing, listening to one another without judging, just listen and try to learn, I think the Spirit would lead us to decisions which would surprise us in the future.
I think
I think understanding is that there has never been a unified Anglican communion. We are all in the making to be one. We have never been one so as now to mourn, oh well, look. No, we have not. So it is an opportunity to grow into oneness in Jesus Christ. We've never been one. I mean, the Canadian church and African church have just started to get to know one another. The English church, a little bit, maybe they know that, because in the past they were involved in missionary activities, whereas the Canadian church with Africans, only one or two missionaries supported by other missionary societies outside Canada who had come to Tanzania. So my concern is anything to do with bringing us together, that would be commendable.
I've listened to the learnings that you've been discovering and realized they're very similar to those that I discovered as part of the continuing Indaba process. And I hope that the learnings of this group and of the continuing Indaba will be able to come together as part of the future of the Anglican Communion.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bishop Mdimi.
Thank you.